Who has the higher upside, Dusty Stromer or Davis Fogle? Either way, the Zags are well equipped on the wing for years to come.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Monday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Gametime. Folks, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Today is also Mailbag Monday. For those of you who want to get involved in Mailbag Monday, the easiest way to do so is to join our Discord channel. There is a link in the show notes on both audio and video platforms. It is free to join. We're talking Zags 24/7. There's channels for women's basketball, pro Zags, summer league Zags, all sorts of good, fun stuff going on in that Discord channel. You can also ask mailbag questions in the mailbag channel as well. You can also email me, andypatton013@gmail.com, if you'd like to get your questions answered that way. We got a bunch of different great stuff to get to today. We're going to start with this question here from the Heartland Zag on Discord, who says, who has the higher ceiling and floor, Dusty or Fogle? Yeah, definitely already seen some comparisons between these two guys. Dusty Stromer, of course, freshman last year for Gonzaga, top 50 recruit in the 2023 class. Davis Fogle committed to Gonzaga on the 4th of July. He is a top 40, top 50 prospect in the 2024 recruiting class, or excuse me, 2025 recruiting class. He will be a freshman next season. He's playing this current high school season at Compass Prep in Arizona. They're both 6'6", 6'7". They're both guard wing types. It's easy to see why there are some kind of comparisons between these two guys. Right now, for me, the floor and the ceiling is higher in both situations for Dusty Stromer. However, the ceiling for the two of these guys, I think, is fairly close. In terms of floor, I think it's pretty significant. It's a significant difference right now. Dusty Stromer has a considerably higher floor than Davis Fogle, and the main reason is because we just haven't seen Davis Fogle consistently play a lot of high-level competition. I don't want this to sound like I think there's a chance that Davis Fogle is not going to be up to the standard to play at Gonzaga. I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be good in Gonzaga's system. I think he's a good fit. I think there's a reason that he's rocketing up a lot of these rankings, and I think that the upside and the potential for him to be a big-time contributor is pretty high. But the floor is pretty low. It has to be. The majority of the competition that he has faced in his collegiate career is at the 2A level in the state of Washington from his time at Anacortes High School. He's played with select teams. He's played well at Pangos All-American Camp this summer. He's played well in the summer circuit, and he's probably going to play well next year at Compass Prep in Arizona. But until we see that, I think we have to assume that the ceiling, or excuse me, the floor for Dusty Stromer, who has already proven himself a capable college basketball Division I level defender, who has proven himself capable to hit that corner three. He still has to show some improvement in terms of driving to the basket, getting to his spots, finishing through contact, things like that. But again, those are stuff that we haven't seen from Davis Fogle either. We haven't, in the summer circuit, he didn't finish around the rim all that well. That's an area of improvement for him. He needs to get stronger. Dusty Stromer already kind of went through a year of learning what you need to, how you need to be physically in order to play at this level. So I think for him, he's got a leg up in that area just because he's already been in the system and already seen that. I think, again, the ceiling for Davis Fogle is quite high. If he does find a consistent outside three-point shot, if he fills out his body after growing 2 inches in high school and gets stronger and more capable of finishing around the rim, if he improves as a defensive player and can really kind of fit and be both a point of attack defender and a help side defender, which is areas that Dusty Stromer is already pretty good at, then yeah, the ceiling for Fogle is fantastic. He could be a 3-and-D wing who plays really well at Gonzaga, gets all WCC honors and gets selected in the NBA draft. The ceiling is absolutely that for Davis Fogle. It's just also that for Dusty Stromer. They basically have the same type of ceiling. I think Dusty's is a little bit higher. I think it's quite close for the two of them, but certainly the floor right now is much higher for Dusty just because he's already done it for a year, and we've kind of seen what that looks like for him. Next question here comes from Adam via Gmail. Adam says, assuming the starting lineup is Nembhard, Hickman, Ajayi, Greg, and EK, my question is, where do you think Gonzaga's backups would finish in the conference? I would say 5th or 6th. What about you? Smith, Battle, Venters, and Stromer, Huff, Diani. I know there's a lot of changes that could happen. but for the sake of the hypothetical. Yeah, that team's pretty darn stacked. Ismaila Diani starting at the 5. He's very young, obviously, but extremely talented, a ton of upside there. Just his size alone would be impactful in the WCC, will be impactful in the WCC as a starter. He would make an impact even if he's pretty raw. Braden Huff at the 4, he'd be an all WCC candidate as a starter. He might be an all WCC candidate coming off the bench for Gonzaga. Venters and Stromer, you probably start Venters in that situation. You have Battle at the 2. You have Brayton Smith playing the 1, a guy who is expected to seamlessly replace Ryan Nembhard at the point guard position after his final year here. You'd also have Emmanuel Inocente coming off the bench here. So that's 7-man rotation right there. You're thin in the front court. If you feel comfortable playing Steel Venters at the 4, you probably could get away with that. Yeah, I think this team finishes 5th, 6th, somewhere like that in the conference. Realistically, they may even finish higher than that. Braden Huff and Braden Smith are all WCC caliber players. So is Caleb Battle. In a starting role, he'd be the team's leading scorer, I think. Him or Huff would be the leading scorer in this situation. And I think that they would all be contenders for all WCC. So I wouldn't be shocked if this team finishes high as 4th, maybe even 3rd in the conference, but I think it's more likely they're probably closer to the 5th, 6th range, especially when you factor in the lack of depth in the front court. Really fun team, though, and the fact that it's Gonzaga's backups, wow, that this team is as deep as they have ever been. Final question of the segment comes from Nick B via Gmail, who says, what do Anton Watson and Drew Timme need to do to make an NBA roster out of Summer League? They both need to hit outside shots. Watson has an advantage right now, obviously having been selected in the NBA draft. He has, as of this recording, not signed any kind of guaranteed contract. We've seen a lot of second-round picks who have signed these 3-4-year deals. Jalen Wells from Washington State just signed one. Jonathan Mobo signed one. Bronny James signed one. We've seen quite a few of them. Watson has not yet. Boston is probably looking at him to compete for one of those two-way spots, in which case his contract is not guaranteed. But with a two-way deal, you do get guaranteed time spent on the NBA roster. Drew Timme doesn't have that. Drew Timme has no contract other than he's with the Toronto Raptors in Summer League. He was with the Sacramento Kings, had a double-double in 21 minutes, which was fantastic. In his one game with Sacramento, now he's with Toronto. He's bouncing around the G League. Teams are looking at him. Teams are scouting him, but nobody has signed him to any level of a contract. It is hard to be in the position that Drew Timme is in right now and get an NBA contract or even a two-way contract. It is difficult. For Drew to do that, the outside shot needs to be that. We've already seen it look pretty good in the G League last year and in the spurts, even in the Summer League here. He can shoot it. We just need to see it consistently. And I think for him, making sure the foot injury is fully healed and that he's moving laterally, the mobility needs to be good. The defense needs to be at least capable of being able to play him on the floor and not just have him be put on skates every single possession. He needs to prove that he can do that. Up to this point, he has not done that. Until he proves definitively that he can be a switchable defender in the league, or he's so good offensively that you're willing to play him in drop coverage in certain situations, he's going to have a hard time. Watson, much easier path. Hit those outside shots. Drill the corner threes. Play good defense. Prove that your athleticism can play at this level. He's got a decent wingspan. His athletic testing was solid, but if he looks out like he's getting out-athleted, that's going to give Boston some pause about wanting to give him a significant, give him one of the valuable two-way contracts. But if he looks like he's athletic enough to hang with in the Summer League is not set up very well for a player like Anton Watson. Summer League is a lot more one-on-one style basketball. It's not very cohesive. There's not a lot of offensive being runs and sets and things like that. So I do worry a little bit about Watson, but if he hits the shots that he's supposed to hit, if he's confident in taking those three-point corner shots, if he knocks the ball away, gets some steals, gets out in transition, he's going to be just fine. At Boston, they didn't draft him. They didn't use that pick on him without having a serious eyeball on him getting one of those two-way spots or even a guaranteed roster spot. So I feel a little bit more confident, or a lot more confident right now in Watson than Timme, but he's still got some stuff he's got to prove in the Summer League. So, folks, we got conference realignment discussion about the Big East, the Pac-12, the Mountain West, and more coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about today's sponsored Game Time. Folks, minor league baseball season is right in the midst of things, and someone who lives about 10 minutes away from a minor league baseball stadium, I love being able to make a last-minute ticket to grab a buddy, to go out to a game, get a beer and a hot dog, watch some minor league baseball. And that's why I use Game Time, because prices on the Game Time app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And if you're somebody who worries about getting tickets that aren't real from a third-party source, you're going to get turned away at the door, all that good stuff, Gametime's ticketing coverage has the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry. And I love having that peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Folks, you can get 2 tickets to a minor league game for like $25. So you want to go for $5? Download Gametime today. Use that code LOCKEDONCollege. You'll get $20 off. Terms do apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still going through Mailbag Monday here, and we got 3 questions from Jeff via Gmail to cover here in the second segment, all of them related, or at least 2 of them related to conference realignment, 1 of them related to the WCC. This first one from Jeff, with the Big East getting its new media rights deal without expansion happening, is expansion with the Big East dead? The Big East deal appears to include additional television carriers like TNT. With TNT not having many NBA games in the future, does the Big East have a large enough volume of games available to give Fox, TNT, and other partners what they want for total games? To answer the second question, no, the Big East is not solely responsible for getting basketball content out for Fox and TNT and Max and Peacock and all their other partners. They're going to have this. They're just taking a small pool of these. Fox is effectively still taking the vast majority of men's basketball Big East games. The other partners are getting some other games. They're getting some women's game, which is valuable in the Big East with UConn in particular. And they're going to get some of the conference games, but it's just a small package for like TNT and the other. It's not a big chunk of Big East games, and it's not going to be a big chunk of the basketball content for places like Max or TNT. Having said that, would the partners be happy to hear that Gonzaga is coming into the Big East and adding more games, more late TV slots? Like you could play a Gonzaga Creighton game at 8 p.m. on a Friday, where that's going to be a slot that's probably not filled for Fox or probably not filled for TNT, and they get to fill it with a Gonzaga game. Yeah, I think the media partners would be happy about that. So the idea that realignment can't continue to happen after the media deal, I'm not sure I buy that. Having said that, the Big East is not going to prioritize expansion now. Gonzaga would have been good leverage for them if they were struggling to get their media rights deal. They got the deals that they wanted. They do not have to focus on realignment as a way to spice up their media rights deal. So it is not a priority. I'm not sure how much of a priority it ever was, quite frankly. I think it was logical that it would be something they could use as a bargaining chip, but I don't know how seriously they even pursued it. There is certainly language in these new media deals for the Big East that detail conference realignment, that detail expansion, that detail losing partners. There's no way that the lawyers wouldn't have made sure that that language is in there. What that language is and how impactful it would be positively for the Big East to add a school like Gonzaga, I don't know. I don't know the language in those deals. I don't know exactly what it would look like. I don't see why the media partners wouldn't want Gonzaga in particular. We know that their TV power numbers is insanely high, and that there's a lot of interest in watching the Zags on TV, and that would not change with a move to the Big East. And I do think those late TV slots are valuable kind of things that the Zags could potentially offer. But I don't think that the schools right now are super gung-ho about, hey, we just got a media rights deal. Let's see what this looks like. Let's kind of figure out all the financial pieces. They're not gung-ho to then make another drastic change. And it would be a drastic change to add a school as far away as Gonzaga. So I don't think that the schools are going to prioritize realignment at this point. And therefore, I think it is probably, I wouldn't say dead, but it's certainly put to rest for right now. And I think that may be the case for at least a full calendar year, maybe even longer. I know the Big East deal doesn't even go into effect for another year, but I would be fairly surprised if this is something that gains a lot of traction in the coming months or even year for Gonzaga. Next question, another one from Jeff via Gmail. He says, have you heard anything for when decisions will be made regarding whatever the Pac-12 Mountain West combination thing will be? Yeah, I have not. If I had, I would have probably passed it along to somebody else by now. I'm not sitting on that information by any stretch here. I don't know what's going to happen with the Pac-12, with the 2 Pac-2 schools remaining, Washington State and Oregon State. Obviously, they have a scheduling agreement with the Mountain West for football. They're each playing, I think, 7 different Mountain West schools as part of their independent football schedule. They are obviously housing the rest of their sports outside of baseball in the WCC for right now. That is the extent of what we know. Those programs are planning to be in the WCC for this upcoming academic year and the following year. After that, it is unknown. The scheduling agreement is for 2 seasons as well. The plan has always kind of been for there to be some kind of merger. Now it's looking like the Pac-2 might just poach the programs that they want instead of doing a full merger, which costs the Pac-12 a lot more money. But they have it. They have a big storage of money that they won successfully, so they can use it to poach schools like San Diego State and Boise State and whoever else they want out of those Mountain West schools. If that happens and 5-6 Mountain West schools get left behind, it'll be interesting to see what that conference then tries to do. Do they try to poach from the WCC? Do they poach from the Summit League and grab like North Dakota State, South Dakota State? Do they try to merge with another conference? Like, how does that work? If the Pac-12 the Pac-2 adds 5 or 6 Mountain West schools, do they also then go after Gonzaga? Is there a bidding war between the new Pac-12, which would be a Pac-8, and the rest of the Mountain West schools? If so, obviously Gonzaga is going to want to go to that new Pac conference. Are they going to sit and wait for the Big 12 or the Big East? Lots of different factors, and all of it is kind of waiting on any kind of update or information on this Pac-2 Mountain West situation and what comes out of that. But unfortunately, as football season gets closer and closer, the likelihood of hearing any major updates on that story kind of get thinner and thinner. So unless we hear something very soon, there's a chance we don't hear anything on that until the middle of basketball season, if not the end of this upcoming academic year. So not for basically an entire year. Final question this segment, another one from Jeff. He says, if we include Washington State as a WCC program, there were 3 WCC players who were drafted in the 2024 NBA draft. Combined with the previous 2 drafts, that gives the WCC 10 players who have been drafted in the past 3 years. What does it say about the strength of the conference for that many players drafted by NBA teams? Could that translate into NCAA tournament success, such as Santa Clara finally getting back to the tournament for the first time since 1996? Well, it hasn't so far. Okay, first of all, I think it's pretty cheeky to count Jalen Wells as a WCC player. He never played a single second of basketball as a member of the WCC. I get it that Washington State is now in the WCC, but that change officially happened on July 1st. The draft happened on June 27th was the day that Jalen Wells got picked. So I don't really think that it counts, but I understand the logic of including them in this conversation. But, you know, Maxwell Lewis goes from Pepperdine. Pepperdine was terrible that year. Santa Clara has had back-to-back draft picks in Jalen Williams and then Brandon Pajemski. They had a player who many thought would have been drafted this year if he'd stayed in the draft in Adama Alpha-Ball, and none of those years did Santa Clara make the NCAA tournament. So it's not leading to that kind of success. Will it eventually? Maybe. We've seen a lot of down transfers, like what Brandon Pajemski did, come from a high major program, transfer to a WCC school, and have success. Adama Alpha-Ball did that, transferring from Arizona to Santa Clara, having a fantastic year, putting himself in the conversation as a draft pick. There are players who have done that this year. I'm thinking we will have longer conversations about them in the future. Perhaps we'll bring on Zach Farmer, who comes on from the unofficial WCC Hoops pod, to talk about some of these guys like Jan Vide, who transfers from UCLA, to LMU. There are a couple other transfers in that ilk who we think might have very successful seasons in the conference next year. But ultimately, it hasn't led. Jonathan Mobo didn't lead San Francisco to the tournament. Neither Pajemski or Williams led Santa Clara to the tournament. Maxwell Lewis didn't even get Pepperdine out of the cellar in the WCC. So it hasn't, having individual performers who go to the NBA hasn't led to more team success in the WCC. And while it may lead to more players continuing to do that, and eventually enough players like that could put you in the tournament, that hasn't happened yet. So I'm not sure that we have seen these draft picks over the last couple of years dramatically move the needle in terms of these teams' overall success and their perception around the college basketball landscape. Well, folks, we're going to close out the show examining a full picture of former Zags set to participate in the Olympic Games now that we know which 12 men's basketball program countries will be in the Olympics. We're going to talk about that and how things might play out in Paris, all coming up in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are closing out the show with 3 more mailbag questions here on a Monday edition of the podcast. This question comes from Eli on Instagram. Check out the Locked On Zags Instagram account if you have not done so yet. With the 12 countries set for the Olympics, what's the total count of Zags participating in this year's games? Yes, let us get into it. There are 7 Zags, and I say participating in quotes. If you count Mark Few coaching as participating, I think we do. If you count Jalen Suggs as being on the select team as participating, that's a bit more questionable. He's technically not really a part of the actual Olympics. So it's 7 or 6, depending on how you consider Jalen Suggs. that are set to participate in the Olympics this year. You have 3 for Canada, 2 for the U.S., Few and Suggs, of course. You have 1 for Serbia, 1 for Japan. Let's get into them. USA, of course, Mark Few. Assistant coach alongside Steve Kerr and Eric Spoelstra and Tyronn Lue, has been out there for a while, has been involved with Team USA for many years. Really cool opportunity. We talked at length about his thoughts on being in the Olympics on a recent episode of the show. Go check it out if you have not done so yet. It's fantastic stuff. He's very excited to get a chance to represent his country at the Olympic Games. Jalen Suggs was selected to the select team, which is who competed against Team USA in practices. They've been with them in Las Vegas for the last couple of weeks. We've seen great pictures of Mark Few and Jalen Suggs interacting with each other. We saw Jalen Suggs playing really good defense against guys like Drew Holiday and whatnot in scrimmages and practices against Team USA. So very cool for him to get that opportunity. Again, even if he's not going to be, one of the people walking in to the Olympic Games at the opening ceremonies, he's still a pseudo part of this Team USA Olympic kind of atmosphere for right now. Canada is where 3 of the 7 Zags are representing, 2 of them on the men's senior team in Kelly Olynyk and Andrew Nembhard, 1 of them on the women's senior team in current Zag Yvonne Ejim. Kelly Olynyk's been Canada's team captain for a while. He's kind of represents Canada basketball. He's kind of their figurehead, as it were. He's not the best player on that team. That's probably going to go to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You have other fantastic players on that roster as well. You have Jamal Murray is on the roster. Lou Dort is on the roster. There's some fantastic talent on that team. Kelly Olynyk's kind of their big man, going to play the center position, a valuable role for them. Andrew Nembhard gets his first invite, or accepts his first invite to play with Team Canada this year. A guy who didn't participate last year after his phenomenal rookie season with their FIBA tournament, but kind of regretted it and decided he really wanted to participate this year. He had a phenomenal performance in the Eastern Conference playoffs, and that kind of bumps him into an opportunity here. Again, like I mentioned with SGA and Jamal Murray and some other great guards, I'm not sure what role Nembhard's going to have, but he played so well this last summer in the playoffs. It's hard for me to imagine he doesn't play a big role. And then there's Yvonne Ejim. Ejim's not expected to have a big role. She's one of the youngest players on the roster. Not the youngest, by the way. I think it's Shyla Swartz is an incoming freshman at the collegiate level who is representing Team Canada. So they have some young talent on that roster, a lot of WNBA talent for Yvonne. The opportunity to compete with those WNBA players against professionals in the Olympics is huge for her in terms of coming back for her final year at Gonzaga, and hopefully helps kind of keep her name on the radar as a potential draft pick in the WNBA. For Serbia, Filip Petrusev is on that roster. He'll be backing up some guy named Nikola Jokic at the center position. Very cool for Filip to get that opportunity. And then for Japan, Rui is back. There was some question of whether Rui would return for Japan in the Olympic Games because he had some mental health issues that came out after the 2020 Olympics, which were hosted in Tokyo, and Japan not living up to the expectation that perhaps he had for the team. He did great in those Olympics, but the team didn't do very well, and it really kind of messed with him a little bit. So happy to see he's back. Hopefully he's in a better spot mentally to be able to compete in these games without it impacting him in a significant way. 2 other players who would have competed had their teams made it. Lithuania was eliminated, so Domantas Sabonis did not make the Olympics this year. Unfortunate. Always love seeing Sabonis compete, and he will not get that opportunity. The Dominican Republic had Angel Nunez, former Zag from 2013 to 2015, guy who transferred to the program from Louisville. He was with that Dominican Republic team. Unfortunately, they were eliminated before they got an opportunity to compete in the Olympic Games as well. Next question on that same topic comes from Spicy Lord Wade via Discord, who says, what are your best and worst case scenarios for Zags at the Olympics and in Summer League? All right, let's start with the Olympics. Suggs, I think we can kind of just eliminate. There's not really any best or worst case scenario for him. Obviously, if he'd gotten hurt, that would be tragic, but up to this point, at least he has not. For Mark Few, anything less than gold is a disappointment for the U.S. I guess it's not the worst case scenario, but it's a pretty bad scenario if they don't win. The worst case scenario is not medaling at all. That would be horrifying for Team USA. I don't know how much it would reflect on Mark Few. It should reflect on him very little if that were to happen, but he would be crushed, as would everybody, if they didn't medal. But really, the worst case scenario is pretty much just not winning gold, and obviously the best is winning gold. For the other teams, it's kind of limited. For Petrusev, there's not a lot of pressure on him. If Serbia doesn't do well, it's not going to be his fault. They're not expected to be a medal team, so there's not a ton of best worst case. Obviously, injuries is the worst case for all these guys. I think that's fairly safe. For Petrusev, getting an opportunity to play and struggling and really not looking capable of playing against NBA caliber talent or professional talent would be bad, but it's just he's not going to be relied upon all that much. For Rui, it's what happened last time. It's coming out of this feeling like you let down your country, struggling mentally with that, having that translate into a poor performance in the NBA next year, or, missing games like he did last year. Japan's probably not going to medal, but the worst case scenario for Rui is definitely more on his side from a mental health perspective. For the Canadians, it's failing to medal. And that may happen. I think they're good enough to medal this year. I think they should medal, but if they don't, they're going to be upset. I follow a lot of Team Canada people. I kind of follow the country a lot because of Kelly's connection and now Nembhard's connection and Yvonne on the women's side. And they're really expecting to medal this year. So for Kelly, it would be letting the team down. He's kind of their best hope in the front court. So if he struggles and doesn't defend big men well and doesn't kind of handle his role in the front court, that's going to be the worst case scenario for him. For Nembhard, it'll be, again, failing to step up when asked. For the team in general, it's just not medaling. For Yvonne, obviously getting hurt would be incredibly tragic, but really it's just not contributing when called upon and the team not doing as well as expected. For Summer League, for Strathort's getting hurt, there's not really anything else. He could play not very well, and it wouldn't really matter. He's still going to have a role for this team next year. At least he's still going to be on the roster for them next year. For Watson, it's not making those shots or not looking athletic enough. We kind of talked about that earlier in the show. For Timme, it's the same thing. Or, of course, a really bad scenario for him would be re-injuring that foot and missing the rest of Summer League and potentially kind of being in limbo where he's not even signed to a team because he's dealing with that injury. Final question of the show comes from the Heartland Zag on Discord. Starts the show and ends the show with his questions. He says, fun question, but of everybody on Gonzaga, open shot, the fate of the universe is on the line. The Martians have a death beam pointed at Earth. You got to hit the shot. Who do you trust to hit it? On the current team, we're going Nolan Hickman. That man is clutch. The amount of times last year where Gonzaga needed a three just to stop the bleeding. The other team was on a run. The crowd was getting into it. There was some momentum. I feel like Nolan Hickman hit 80-something% of the shots he took in those situations. This man is clutch when Gonzaga needs him to be clutch. And in this situation, as clutch as it gets, I'm giving him the basketball. If we're talking all time, it has to be Adam Morrison. It has to be Adam Morrison. Kevin Penko's a great shooter. Dan Dickau's a great shooter. The Zags have had plenty of fantastic shooters, Corey Kispert, et cetera, et cetera. But Adam Morrison was the guy. He was the dude. You put the ball in his hands and you let him go to work, whether it was fading bank shot threes to win battle in Seattle, whether it was shots at the free throw line, getting to the basket, any kind of look that Adam Morrison could get, he knocked it down. So that's got to be your answer there. Going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Reminder to join the Discord channel if you have not done so yet. We'll be back later this week. We got more fantastic conversations as we get ready for the Olympic Games. We'll continue to keep you up to date on the recruiting going on in college basketball. We'll also talk realignment and so on and so forth. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, as always, go Zags.